TV that intrigued you?
Well, an odd route towards that, towards my being a writer, and especially a dramatic writer. And I actually noted it this September, interestingly enough, is the 50th anniversary of my moving to New York from Chicago to go to the acting school at NYU.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the PhD program, working toward a PhD in English at the University of Chicago, but I had done some amateur acting when I was stationed in the Air Force in Texas, and I auditioned for NYU, and I decided that I was going to go. So
Okay.
I turned down a Ford Foundation full fellowship to finish my PhD, to come to New York with very little money to study acting. And that, when I finished acting school and did some worked with here and there, I also wrote my first play while I was doing a show off Broadway in 1978. And
Wow.
that play went to the Eugene O'Neill National Playwrights Conference a year later. I met Roy Richards. I started meeting more acting people. And that sent me on a journey to writing plays. And as I was doing that, of course, I was teaching, because I have a master's degree in English, and then I had an MFA in acting. But because I had many plays eventually being written and produced, I allowed universities to consider the MFA a terminal degree, quote unquote, in writing, even though it was in acting.
Oh my goodness.
But they assumed, because I was a writer, that the MFA was in creative writing, in theater and script writing and so on. And so that's what I taught at universities, in addition to African American drama and contemporary drama and things like that. So that was my journey from. That's how I got into the creative arts. That's how I got into theater. That's how I got into playwriting. And then eventually in 1990, I got my first television assignment, and I got into television writing. And I continue to do both.
So you took a chance and you gambled on yourself, basically. And
yes, I
were
did.
Like, you know what? I have little money. I'm just going to go and risk it all. And I don't know what risk it all means. Only you do. But can you tell us and the listeners and the people who will be listening, like, what strength that it takes, not just internally, but just for you to make a conscious decision that, you know what, this is bigger than me. I'm going to take this on, and I'm going to see it all the way through.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I have to thank my parents, who were very supportive of me. I went through college, undergraduate school and so on, with multiple scholarships, because I was valedictorian of my graduating class in DC where I grew up. And then I got this money poured onto me, and my parents were appreciative of that. So when I told my parents, I don't want to finish the PhD, I know I have all this money that they're giving me, but I really need to find myself through this. And I got into the acting school. I want to go, Mom and Dad. And they said, okay, you haven't gotten any financial aid. We will pay for your first year at NYU.
Wow.
So they supported me. So I gave the only car I ever owned to my sister, moved to NYU, moved to New York. And then after the first year, I got fellowships from NYU. So then I was paying for it myself. But it was my parents' agreement to support me for that year that helped motivate me.
Good evening.
So I have to, kudos to my parents who supported me. But also, I just had to do it. And it was tough, because the month that I made that decision, it was in the spring of 1974. And my birthday month in April, I got actually physically sick to my stomach. I was so scared, but I got through that. and kept on to, this is what I must do, I need to do. And then through that summer and into New York, finally, I essentially never looked back.
And never looking back basically got you into doing television and writing for TV. And
Right.
what was a defining moment on the opportunity that you got? How did it happen, and who presented you with an option for you to write, not just for TV, but in this particular case throughout, children's television, and
Right.
writing as well.
Yeah. Well, my first job was in a new sitcom called Married People, and what happened was they were looking for. This was the summer of 1990. The summer when Dick Wolf, who is also my age, created Law and Order, for example. So that was way back
Hmm.
then.
Right.
And the actor's name was Ray Arana, and we had been at Eugene O'Neill together. He was a black actor, but he was also a playwright. So
Hmm.
when they were looking for black writers for this new sitcom series, Ray recommended me. The producers contacted me, and I spoke to them over the phone, and they said, well, why don't you pitch a couple of ideas and maybe we'll give you an assignment. I pitched some ideas. They called me back and said, no, we want you on staff. Would you like to come to LA? And that was my beginning.
Mm.
So I have to thank Ray for that. He gave me the opportunity to be to write for that series. He was in it, and the black actress Barbara Montgomery played his wife, and I had already known Barbara, and so that's how I got started. And I didn't last that long. Sitcom wasn't really my bailiwick, but I learned a lot
Yeah.
about working in TV. And in addition to that, I had to come to LA by myself because my ex-wife, or then my wife, and my two daughters, who were like 6 and 7 years old, they weren't going to move to LA. So it was really tough on us. I'm in there, but I was making money, and we
Yeah.
needed the money and all of that. But I didn't last long. The series didn't last long. I didn't last long on it. Not really all that great at writing sitcoms. I also wrote for True Colors a bit that Frankie Faison was starring in. So Frankie, who went to NYU with me, although he graduated earlier, recommended me for that. Then I got back to New York, and a month after I got back to New York in early 1991, I get a call from Sesame Workshop.
Mm-hmm.
They had developed this new series called Ghostwriter, and they had heard about my writing, and they wanted me to talk to them about being on that show. And that summer of 1991, they hired me and Karen Greenberg as co-head writers for this new TV series, Ghostwriter. And I spent 2.5, 3 years on that show.
And with that, Mr. Frazier, I'm gonna literally kind of talk to you about, like, as you're talking, I'm getting chills. And Denai, I know you're on too. So I know you have questions regarding not just Ghostwriter, but just the opportunity you got from that. So let me tell you how I feel, and Denai is going to probably tell you, and hundreds of millions of other people will basically confirm the same when we go on. It changed a lot of how we looked at television, how we looked at reading, how we looked at developing internal confidence in ourselves to be able to, talk, speak, read, write, and comprehend other things that other people are saying in a diverse cast that was brought to you to write for Ghostwriter was a historic thing, in my opinion. So, Denai, before you ask the question, I'm going to ask Mr. Frazier this. Did you know at that particular time when you began, or when you were given the opportunity to write for Ghostwriter and co-write for it, that it still transcends to today? Like, a lot of people, if you go on social media, if you go on YouTube, if you go on our channel, people talk about it like with so much pride and so much conviction, and how we grew up with that. It's a powerful thing to witness and to still realize this today, right?
Yes, I'm kind of pretty amazed at that. We didn't know when I was in it. of course, when you're in it, all you know is this is something that you believe in and something that you want to do. And again, I didn't create the show per se.
Right.
It had already been. They had shot a test show also, although it wasn't formally a pilot, because a pilot usually is the first show of a series. It was a test show, so we didn't have a pilot. So when I came on, I was the one that helped to write. I wrote Ghost Story, which was essentially the premiere when Ghost Rider comes to Jamal for the first time through the book. I created the backstory for Ghost Rider, that he was a slave who was reading to kids in the woods 100 years before, and slave catchers chased him, and he deployed himself in a way that the kids could get away, and they got him instead, and his spirit went into the book that he was reading to them. And that book ended up in the basement of Jamal's grandmother's house, and that when the book opened, the spirit came out and latched onto him. So that was sort of my way. This is how we're gonna say that Ghost Rider was created. Right. And so I'm very proud of being. I mean, even though there were other writers, and of course the producer Liz Nealon was already on, because she had helped write the pilot, helped write the test show, and she came from MTV. But I was really proud of being that. In fact, I played Ghost Rider in one of the episodes because Ghost Rider was going to come in a vision to Gabby. And they said, well, who's going to do that? He said, let's just let Kermit play Ghost Rider. I mean, he's an actor. We'll put him on. I didn't have any words, but I dressed up in this sort of, you don't know who it's in Am I Blue. You don't know who that person is, but that's me. So Ghost Rider's spirit sort of is through me. And also for me, what was important is that my daughters were in elementary school at that time. So they were among the target audience. And they were so proud of their dad because everybody in their school knew that their dad was writing the show that everybody was watching. And they had personal Ghost Rider jackets that they wore around the school, in the elementary school in the village. And they also, they each got a chance to be in the show. No lines, but they both appear in the show. So they were really happy about it. And they were like 9, 8. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say it was huge. I mean, you had the books, you had the games, it was just such a fanatic type of feeling, but also, and Denai's going to ask you questions too, but it was just a feeling that we all had, that to see, a lot of diversity involved in it as well, which I thought was huge. And Denai, go ahead with your question.
Absolutely. Good morning, Mr. Frazier. How are you?
Good morning. I'm fine.
This is definitely an honor. So I think for me, the biggest thing with when it comes to Ghost Rider was the fact that you dealt with a lot of serious topics. So what made you decide to take that leap and put topics like gangs and racism and bullying into a kids show?
Well, first of all, the Sesame Workshop, well, it was Sesame Street then, became Sesame Workshop, was very willing to allow us to do that. That they had never done a live action kids show. Other shows, Sesame Street, which is great, is segment writing. It's a series of segments, but actually a live action with a storyline. First of all, we had to invent our mode. So we had a 2-hour mystery, but we couldn't run it actually, 2 hours. Kids, that's not for kids. So we had to break it up into half hours. So the structure was a combination of daytime TV and hour drama and movie of the week and all of those, and half hour. So we said that the mystery would have plot points that would carry you over at the end of each of the first 30 minutes. So you want to come back to see, what's going to happen now? So you have a plot point at the end that would end the mystery. That would be the A story. But in addition, we would have a B story in each of the 4 episodes, which resolved itself, and that had to do with family matters or personal issues, which were not about the mystery. So that's how we gave a kind of satisfaction in winding up and learning more personally about the kids in each half hour, while being in suspense at the end of that half hour to watch this.
Awesome!
And we created that ourselves. That was the structure we created.
This is a great interview.
You know what made it so realistic and so perfect, and in my opinion, and I'm sure the opinions of others, to watch it, not just live, but even running it back on YouTube, or Noggin back in the day.
It's all on YouTube now.
Some of the other ones, So one thing that was cool was you were able to write and flesh out the character development for every single individual one that mattered within the show. And I thought it was brilliant to be able to flesh it out and to be able to have like rooting moments for every single person, adult and child. And I think it was great to be able to witness and see. And when you mentioned, Kermit, that the runaway slave and things like that, and I think the final season kind of touched on that for an episode. And then I was like, and I know funding kind of took a hit, and that's why we didn't see much of it or whatever from what I was reading about. But did you have more plans in terms of like helping the kids realize exactly who Ghost Rider was at that time?
I had always planned over the course of however long the show would last, that one of the points was that in discrete episodes, discrete movies, stories, there would be another clue to Ghost Rider. So, for example, I probably wrote more of the 2-hour mysteries than the other writers did, because I wrote the pilot. I worked with Alexa Young, who eventually left and then later created friends in LA and became executive producer there. But Alexa was a young writer, and I helped her on a script that she was writing. And I did the gang story, Building Bridges, which I was really proud of doing, because a lot of people, I didn't know what I was doing until I knew what I was doing, but I didn't know the kind of impact it was going to have. I was so excited about shooting in Brooklyn. We shot all over Brooklyn. We shot at Coney Island. We shot at downtown at the Veterans Memorial down in Lower Manhattan. We shot in Central Park. It was really great. That was
there's a list.
One of the reasons that the show was, and I wasn't all that connected to it, relatively expensive, more expensive than Sesame Workshop thought it was going to be. But they were committed to that, because that's what we're gonna. If we're gonna do this story, we're gonna do it. And I also wrote A Tale of Two Cities, which was the show that takes place partially in London and partially in New York. And I flew to London and BBC was one of the earlier sponsors. So we knew we wanted to have a show that took place there. So I had to figure out a way to get Jamal there, figure out how could there be a mystery that lived both in London and both in New York. So I flew to London and met with the BBC people and toured around and chose some possible layouts and so on. And then I wrote that. And I used that moment because of the actual presence of the Isle of Dogs in London. I used that as one key to Ghost Rider, because he is triggered, quote unquote, by Isle of Dogs, because he thinks of dogs coming after him. And that was one of the clues. So again, those kinds of clues were a way of trying to eventually reveal, who who Ghost Rider really was, because he didn't quite remember.
Right.
So he couldn't tell Jamal or any of the other kids. But it was just, I had such a great time doing that show. It was just,
Yeah.
I think as a fan, we've all like, it's nostalgia to a lot of us now, but it's very like in the moment. Like if you had to be there in the moment, wanting the new episodes, and I love how you broke it down in parts. And I think there was probably like only 2 runs where there was like 5 parters or whatnot. Like it was beautiful.
We did the pilot. We did the pilot. Again, it was going to be 4. It was going to be 2 hours. And then when I was working on the pilot and the introduction of Ghost Rider to all the kids or whatever, we realized we needed more time. So we decided that was going to be 5 episodes rather than 4. And that worked out really well. So I had to structure that because there were 2 things going on at the same time: the introduction of Ghost Rider and the first mystery with the Thaptos.
Right.
And the thing about the Thaptos, by the way, is that I created Thapto, that acronym, and throughout the whole shooting of it, nobody knew what that meant. And I wouldn't tell them. And eventually at the end, I said, okay, TH, 2 heads are better than 1.
Wow, that's awesome.
And I had so much fun keeping that to myself throughout the whole filming.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Love it.
That's beautiful. Then I throw out one more question with Kermit Frazier. Who is our guest on Next Legacy Radio?
Definitely. I want to really go back to Building Bridges real quick. I think what made that specific episode so powerful for me was that it dealt with so many different topics at once. It dealt with the gang issue. It dealt with the discrimination issue. But the biggest thing that it dealt with was don't judge a book by its cover.
Right.
Because everyone was thinking, oh, it's Victor, because he's in the gang, because he's Latino, all of that. And so that, the fact that you were able to pack all of that into one episode really showed the power of imagination, the power of creativity, and it was empowering because you get to see that people can change. 2, you never know who you're talking to, and you never know what everyone's abilities are. So
that's true. I mean, and the actors were really great in that. They did a really good job. We shot near, our studio in New York was 106th and Park. It wasn't called that then. It became the sort of rapper studio at one point. But it was at 100. That's the address, 106th Street. And so that elevated bridge where Victor and Rob meet Victor's friends under that elevator. That was a block away from our studio because that's where the train comes up out of Grand Central, going Metro North train comes. So it was just wonderful, just exciting being able to do that. Even I had to kind of convince people in the final plot. The end of the third half hour is the greatest plot point because in the last half hour we find out who does what and whatever with all the clues. That the gang comes down into their hideout and they're about to beat up Rob. And I said, we need that. It's not going to happen, but we need that because that's a reality. Please let us just keep that. And they did.
Beautiful. Kermit Frazier is our guest on Next Legacy Radio. And before we let you go, what do you think about just literature now, writing, television writing? I know there's a lot of outlets to be able to do a lot of different things, but what are your specific thoughts on just development? Not just the writing process itself, but character development. A lot of things that to me, I feel like is necessary, but depending on what you watch and what you see, sometimes it's not always developed as such.
Right. Well, I've been involved, interesting, in the past couple of years on 2 new animated series that each of them was created by by writers with me on Ghostwriter. So when they did that, they called me and said, we had these, each of them separately called me. We got this new show we want you to work on. So I had been doing that over the past couple of years, and they're both, interestingly enough, involve, the central character is an 8-year-old Black girl who is in a family, both of her parents are Black. She's got older sisters, like 12, and a younger brother who is 5. Coincidentally, in each of those series, that's the family makeup, which is really interesting. So the target audience is 4 to 8-year-olds because you have the central character being at the top of your target audience.
Right.
But you also have a younger character somewhere who is also exact age of your target audience. And then you have some older characters who they can aspire to be. That's how you structure children's television. And so that's still going. I mean, one is already going on. They're both on PBS Kids, and one is called Lila in the Loop, which is already running. Okay. And the other, which will drop sometime next year, was partially created by the weathercaster Al Roker Productions.
Oh wow! Oh, okay.
And it's called Weather Hunters, and it's about a family where the father is like Al Roker, a weathercaster, and the mother is like Al Roker's wife, a producer, and there are kids, and they have a special mission. Anyway, there's more of that kind of children's shows, that have Black kids as the central part of it. And I'm just sort of happy to say, I think that even though we weren't animation, I think we were the first live action, which really allowed kids to be, Latino, our group of kids, especially Tina Nguyen, who's doing really well, and her kids are modeling now. So Tina, I see Tina all the time, but she was she Vietnamese. So we had that, and I think that opened it up for a lot of other people in terms of children's television. I'm really proud of that. Even though I've written plays for kids too. I've commissioned to do that at theaters. But most of my plays are for adults. That's how I do. I mean, my memoir is an adult memoir that was published 2 years ago about growing up in DC, all of that. But I just am proud of being able to be involved in not only in children's television, but in all facets of television. I've done daytime television. I've done hour dramas. I've done half-hour sitcoms. I've done movie of the week. And children's animation. And I worked for a year on Gullah Gullah Island, which was really interesting and really good too.
Well, I appreciate the legacy that you have left and continue to leave for people like us that's checking for you. And speaking of which, are you active in social media? I mean, I found you through IMDb and your website and things like that too, but where can people actually reach out?
Well, they can reach out to me on Facebook.
Okay.
And also Instagram. I'm active those 2 places. But also, my website, they can go to my website and see what I'm involved in right now, because I try to keep that current, and reach out to me from there, because I'd be happy to, just as you reached out to me, I'd be happy to because I have had 2 or 3 people reach out to me through my website and tell me how important Ghostwriter was to their lives.
Right.
And that's always so, because you don't know when you're doing it that's what it's going to be, You don't know when we cast the young Hector, because we wanted to bring on a new, younger Hispanic character. I didn't know he was going to go on later as an actor to be on I don't know, whatever show he's on now, but it's interesting just watching, watching the kids and watching the families, and Sam was in it for a minute, but then Sam Jackson, but then he had to go to LA, so he couldn't, he really couldn't. He was beginning to get his work done out in LA, but he was a part of the show. He was a part of the show, and other folks were a part of the show that we were happy to be connected to.
Well,
and also to be based in New York, be home and be around and shoot on location here. We didn't have to move to LA or move to Florida or anything like that. We were right here. It was a New York show. Brooklyn in the house.
That's right. and Kermit Frazier, I can't thank you enough for not just coming on the Next Legacy, and Denai and I will make sure we direct traffic towards the people who are checking for you to your website, to your Facebook, and to Instagram. But thank you for taking not just the time, but thank you for the work that you've done and continue to do in the name of development, growth, diversity, everything that is important for people to keep moving forward. And it's so awesome to be able to talk to you. You have no idea.
It's so great. It's so great I'm so happy that you reached out to me. It's so wonderful to talk to both of you. And please let me know, where, because I'd like to publicize your work as well. So let me know where this can be heard and where they can be connected to you. Also, I'll reach out to all my folks.
Absolutely. I will tag you, and I will send you the email, or I'll send you an email of the contacts of everything. But Mr. Frazier, thank you for coming on to Next Legacy Radio. You are a true blessing.
Thank you very much,
appreciate
sir.
you.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay.
All right. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the #1 radio station for the people.